So I'm just going to be devil's advocate and ask you, is safety taken seriously here? What do you think?
Well, in my opinion, safety is being taken seriously in some aspect, but education, part of the education, what we have to impart to people is a habit which have to be adapted.
Yeah.
And habit is we are changing, we are trying people, educating the people. Skills from the ground level to up have to be done. I think that's we are working on together.
Gary, how do end users see the safety issue? Do they care?
I think so, yes. And certainly from my experience, where we were 20 years ago to where we are today, there's been a huge change. And end users now are more, I mean, with the online information, they have access to more knowledge. And it is changing.
Tell us more about that change. How do you see the market today?
Today, people, again, it's having access to knowledge. And people like the manufacturers that we have here today, training companies, it's having what's available outside of the region available in this region. So because they've got access to it, they will use it.
Yeah.
The recent announcement with DM pushing with operator training also helps. So governments are now getting on board and starting to mandate, which has got to be a good thing.
Yeah, it has to come from the top, doesn't it? It
Yes.
has to be trickled down from the top. We have to see government, then we have to see large corporates. It has to come from the top.
Yes.
Because traditionally, as we all know, this market is terribly price driven. You know, whether that's insurance, contractual sides of things in contracting, design, implementation, it's totally cost driven. How does that figure in this market?
Well, now, as I mentioned earlier, that's from 50 years, JLG continuous improvement, and one of them was like the new additions of the safety has been done, either anti-entrapment devices or virtual training, which have been added on JLG prospect point of view, where we have added people to train JLG University, and the cost effectively is also, because when you go look into that, it will be more cost effective to go with different way of interesting training programs. And that's actually my role was to implement in our region, educate people to use our product safely and an optimized way, utilization of the machine in a proper way, or less breakdowns, total cost of ownership, all that thing in place safely, intelligently, and as well as productively. So that's what we are working on.
Yeah, I think one of the elements that bothers me here, though, is, you know, we've heard many people today talk about the proper or improper use of equipment and how it's you know, much more prone to break down when it's being abused and wrongly used and so on. How does that apply here? Like, surely training is fundamental to the safety requirement of, you know, of working at heights. Now, what do you think here, Landis? Because I know, you know, PASMA has led many initiatives on this front. Are you making a breakthrough on this front? What do you think?
I totally agree that training on how to use equipment correctly is very important. When it comes to mobile towers, obviously, it's the use of the towers, the assembly of it, the assembly of these towers. The training is available. However, the market here is driven by price, as you said. And sometimes the training that is quality training is a higher priced. And that's where we face the difficulties. But training is very important. And training that is good, that is to a particular standard, is very important to ensure that equipment is used correctly, not damaged, and to avoid any accidents.
Like when I'm riding on the metro through the marina going out towards Jebel Ali every day of my life, I'm reminded of the relevance of your comments, because, you know, ringing through my mind is the 8-meter regulation in Europe, and I'm seeing 120 meter scaffolding being used on developments between the marina and Jebel Ali, and I'm thinking, come on, where do the regulations really exist? The safety criteria really exist? You know, I'm just going through the metro where there's zero scaffolding in place, zero, because we're all working on power platforms quite properly. I go 800 meters down the road and I see 100-meter high scaffolding. How's it working?
For mobile scaffolding, obviously, we will not go 100 meters.
Yeah.
Or I don't think anyone can go 100 meters. But we do see a lot, as you said, when we drive around. Projects will insist on standards. In Abu Dhabi, for example, PASMA is mandated. However, I think it was Wayne that mentioned enforcement is key. Because if we don't enforce what is required by the government, then the projects will assume they do not need to do it. So it's working more with the government to ensure that enforcement is the next step.
Yeah.
And assisting them in how to enforce.
But is enforcement real? I'm just being devil's advocate because I think it's such a crucial issue. Is enforcement really the next step? What's the level of the actual level of on-site inspection? What level is that at?
Internal inspection.
Internal inspection.
This is another issue as well. If the people undertaking inspection don't understand whether it is nukes or mobile towers or any other equipment, it's very hard to inspect. I was in Oman the other day and we were talking about health and safety officers that are being put on site. They've just attended a course, never worked within construction or facilities management or any other sector, and they go out and inspect and they give advice to people. But it is very hard if you don't know what you're advising about.
Totally, because unless a risk inspector is a member of the Chartered Institute of Risk Management, it's not exactly farcical. It could still be worth doing, but it's not that much worth doing because it lacks experience and credibility. Yeah. What do you think about this, Gary?
I completely agree. The challenge for us with manufacturers, we have the onus on us to constantly improve the safety of the machines which we do. And as Ibra's mentioned, the secondary guarding is something that we came out with collectively in the last few years. But, and I'm putting my IPATH hat on at the moment, we have to do more to get the people that are doing the training trained.
Yes.
The quality of these people delivering the training have to be looked at. And that, I think, is where the enforcement from the government needs to really come in. The standards of training have to improve. You can have the content, and the content is available. But it's when these non-regulated companies that are third party, can I say, they're delivering a level of training that doesn't really fit with what's required.
Yes. And isn't that so often the case, though, that the contractor might be completely innocent? Unfortunately, they've appointed a subcontractor that isn't.
Yeah, but they have a piece of paper.
The problem.
Yeah.
So often the problem. Tell us a little bit more. You mentioned a university. Tell us what happens at the university.
JLG started a new website called JLG University, where we do give an access to as much people, free access to the people, to get some more information, videos, online courses, and the certifications. So it's basically awareness of using an access machines, awareness of how to use an access machines. Even from when you get an access, you can download on your applications, on your phone, on your computer, the simulations. So you will understand the familiarization of the control systems. So how to use it, how effectively to use these things. So that's making more aware people to interact with the system and work at the heights.
I think you make a very good point, because one of the things we've seen, ladies and gentlemen, one of the things we've seen throughout the day is the way that manufacturers are creating more and more end-user controls on their equipment. The fixed control panel, the remote control panel on the short lead, the users getting more and more control. But the thing that bothers me is that with greater power, no pun intended, with greater power comes greater responsibility. And I think the training element is even more important than ever here. If you're getting more sophisticated on-site machinery, you make the point that many of those features might never be used, but it could be worse than that because people simply aren't trained to fully use and exploit what the machine can do for the best.
Yes.
What do you think, Gary?
I agree completely. And it might be repeating myself now that you can have all the bells and whistles on a machine, and I use secondary guarding, but if the primary function, which is correct machine selection, risk assessment, and then proper training isn't there, anything else that follows on doesn't really matter because the mistake is at the very front end.
Yes.
And you say, it doesn't matter what you fit, if that first primary function isn't in place, it can just escalate from there.
And, and I still find this quite surprising because if we look at the two most innovative markets in the GCC, Saudi Arabia and the UAE, we see in both countries an enormous commitment to sustainability, to zero carbon. We're seeing, vast projects like the Red Sea Development Project, completely committed to zero carbon, completely committed to the most sophisticated risk management protocols throughout every single aspect. But in reality, we still see many sites that fall short of the mark. Lamis, do you think we're going to see a full-scale commitment to safety training here and in KSA sometime soon? What do you think?
I don't think it's going to be sometime soon.
Yeah.
That's honest opinion. I think it depends. A lot of the times here, it depends on who the main contractor is.
Yes.
Who the client is. Is the world got their eyes on that particular project? And whether they have an accident or not.
Yeah.
And if they don't have an accident, then they don't feel that it's necessary to invest in safety in any aspect, whether it's work at height or other aspects of safety.
And you make a very good point. And also, I think that the basic contractual template as it stands between designer, architect, contractor, sub-supplier and so on is so vague and so cross-referenced, it's sometimes very difficult to see whose responsibility on-site safety actually is. It's quite a bewildering topic. What do you think?
Well, this is who will be the end users. That's
the issue.
Maybe we supply to a rental company. They sold it to one broker. Broker goes to the end user end of the day, and they are aware about the tool, and the training provided by the broker is being certified. It's again a question mark from everyone.
Isn't it?
And that need to goes down. I think it's more awareness on social medias and as well as on the reaching to the customers and users. That should be the aim in the future. And I think what as part of JLG, our distributors and as well as our rental customers, we are continuously providing the education so that end users get benefit of that. I think a lot of companies locally who are training part of it are working hard. So I respect like our customers and rental customers. So I hope that will pass. It take time, but some education I've seen from last 5-6 years, things have changed a lot, and I think more need to be done.
Because I think one of the risks is that we, in many areas of construction, we see a culture of mistrust. We see variables marked up by 200 to 300% because the originator of the variable is so skeptical that they'll ever be refunded the correct amount. So let's triple it while we're at it, kind of thing. And I think it's very, very difficult for parties to actually be seen to accept responsibility under most contractual terms, whereas on-site responsibility is the most important factor of all. So if I can ask each of you, if you were to say what are the 2 or 3 most critical next steps in improving safety at height performance, what would you say they are? Starting with you, Lamis.
I would say awareness for everybody and enforcement.
Enforcement. Yeah. Gary.
I would certainly go with enforcement. I would agree on that one. But a standardization of standards across the region. As you've said, different projects, different countries have different standards. What is good for one project may not be the same for another. And it's getting that commonality across the region. But enforcement definitely, I think, is the number one.
Yeah.
In my opinion, we have to change the habit. We try to push the people to start reading the manuals, which is right from the childhood. People follow them when assembling a Lego. They read the instruction. As we grow up, all people elders here, they buy a mobile, they don't read the manual, they start open it. So that's habit we have to change for everyone. I think that's day-to-day activity can also impart in a machine working at height.
Yeah.
That's my every training when I meet a customer, I say, please change your habit of following the manuals, reading the characteristic of the machine. And I guess that's emphasis on either on Genie or JLG or scaffolding. It can be applicable for all.
Yeah. And I'd just like to end on a note. I wish I could end on a nice happy note here, but I'm not going to pretend there's I'm not going to have rose-tinted spectacles on here. I want to end with an anecdote that I was told by an international arbitrator who has a PhD from the Max Planck Institute in Germany, one of the most respected international arbitrators in the world. And he said, Paul, one of the problems of implementing arbitration findings in a GCC is that there's no executive who will take responsibility for enforcement. So, for instance, a decision could come from the Bahrain Center for Dispute Resolution, can be handed down to any country in the GCC, and whereas in any other nations, generally in Southeast Asia, America or Europe, what will happen is the police become the executive responsible for enacting the decision. Here, throughout the GCC, that rarely, if ever, happens. And the decision is settled in a majlis, whereby people say, look, I'll give you 25% tomorrow if you walk away and leave us alone. And I wonder if that standard of accountability is good enough for working at heights. I think not. But I really value all of your contributions today. The value of expertise cannot ever be underestimated. Please, a huge round of applause for our panelists. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Please.